Hello everyone, we are live with the another class of Bootcamp 2020, and as we have discussed in last two class, we have started with the AWS CDK, the serverless part of which we really need to cover. So today we are going to move further, but Sajja, you want to add first?
Yes, the Lambda function. It has been 5 years since AWS introduced Lambda functions. It has come a long way. When we started off, the first time I think it was just announced, and I and Zeeshan started playing with it. Our problem was that when we added a lot of dependencies and the size of the files became more than 250 meg, it is not allowed in Lambda function. There are a lot of limitations. But now, in the recent reinvent, AWS announced the container version of Lambda functions. Previously, they had announced the edge version of Lambda functions, which basically attached Lambda functions to CloudFormation and made the functions deployed the function near the deployment of CloudFormations, where the user were accessing. So therefore, it has come a long way. It is the basic computing engine of serverless computing. Computation is done in Lambda functions. Zeeshan, let's get started and let's go how to create a Lambda function and deploy it on AWS. We'll get started from there.
Okay, so let me first share my screen. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and you can share your screen.
Okay. Okay, so yes, so I have so first what we need to focus is today we'll be focusing on step number 01, hello Lambda, for to which we need to work with the steps. Okay, so the Lambda function, as we have discussed in our first class as well, and Sarzia has mentioned, so there will be a small chunk of functionality, a small function that will run as a function, and you do not need any separate server or anything, just a code of a function that will uh, 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 you will be deploying to the AWS servers, and then AWS will scale the function, whatever functionality and whenever AWS will receive a request, AWS will start a function, spin up a virtual machine, a small virtual machine, and then run the function, and it will execute and respond to the customer. So that's the basic implementation. So we'll be going from the direction of CDK. So for the first step, as we have done in our previous class, what we need to do is we need to create a directory, create a basic structure, and then we need to create this function. We have seen the lambda function in netlify, so that's the exactly just it's a TypeScript syntax, so you are seeing the typing of variables. Otherwise you can see export sync function name is handler, and it's returning, and the return is status 200, header and body. We were doing a lot of work with the lambda function with netlify. This is the same function, there is no difference, because netlify was using behind the scene AWS. So netlify just given us in a easy way to work on it. That's why it was quite easy for us initially with the netlify. So you can see it's a simple same function, and there is no difference. What difference will in our case with CDK is we'll be creating a stack, and we'll be calling the lambda function as an infrastructure as a code. So we'll be deploying lambda function as infrastructure as a code. So let me start with the initial steps. Let's create a directory first, and let me create. Now we'll need to initialize. So CDK init app dash dash language TypeScript. It will create basic structure of our CDK application, CDK app. Meanwhile, it's installing. Let me show you where you will going to see the in AWS. In AWS, you can search the Lambda at this moment as I was using it. So you can see Lambda. Once I click on it, all our function will be displayed over here. This will be the list of our function, and as in a single application you can have a 2, 3 or 4 functions. So when you click an application, it will show you the name of application, and inside that application you will have your function. So you can explore your Lambda function from this screen. So it is done. Okay, now we have a basic application which we have already seen, the basic app and the stack, and it has nothing. What we need to do is we need to understand that in the previous class we wanted to create S3 bucket. So we had to install S3, and then we had to uh, uh, after installation we need to write a code that spin up or create a stack or a construct for S3. So same goes for the Lambda function. First okay, I have not created the function. Let's create the function first. Okay, so for that what we need to do is we need to create a folder at the root, name Lambda or whatever you need to Lambda, and inside that I'll create a file, let's say hello.ts. Now we need a function code here. So instead of typing something else, I'll just pick this code from here. Once I'll pick this, we will face few problems. Why? Because AWS Lambda is not part of our project at this moment. So we need to install this AWS Lambda. One. Second, we need to install, as I have mentioned, that we need to use Lambda function. So for that, we also need to install the AWS Lambda. So you can see the API reference, AWS CDK API reference. And for that, AWS it will show you how to install AWS Lambda. So at this moment, I'm just using these two element to install npm install AWS Lambda. And as we are working with the TypeScript, so this function requires few parameters, and those parameters are type of Lambda because it will be a Lambda function. So we need to install the AWS Lambda type system. So for that, I'll write the type slash AWS Lambda. Okay, meanwhile it's installing. Let's see. So what we'll do is import these parameters: API gateway, context, and the return type. It's called the API result proxy. If we want to use this as a promise.
Could you increase the resolution, please?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. So it's nothing. If you forget about this, then it's just an event context as we are doing with the JavaScript. So there is no difference. Just we are using with the TypeScript. So you need to understand this in this way. Okay. So export sync, we are exporting a handler function, and whenever this function is being called, we need to return something. So we are sending hello CDK you hit. So even the variable we have been used with the Netlify as well, it has a property path which shows which path you have hit. So that's the simple function. There is nothing else at this moment. Once we have this, we will go to the stack file, and as we have import the AWS Lambda, so what we can do is we can call new Lambda function. Again, every AW CDK construct need three parameters: this, context, key, and the third one is properties. So in this case, what we are saying that we need to create a construct lambda dot function. So we need to create lambda function. Context should be the current name, hello handler, or whatever you need to want to provide. Runtime, so you can provide the Node.js runtime. So for let's say as Node.js is still Node.js has a recent updates available. So if your code, you need to specify specific version of the Node.js, otherwise keep using the latest version. This one is the I guess current one is 12 or 13. And then you need to call code. So from where this construct will pick the lambda code where the function code actually resides. So that's we are saying that lambda.code.from assets, and we are giving the name of a directory which we have created for the lambda, and we are saying the function which is handler. So hello.handler. So let me pick this one.
Zeeshan, let's clarify. This code is not
Yes.
for CDK. This code is basically uh, the previous code was basically for the Lambda function. This is deploying the Lambda function. That's the difference.
Mhm.
This is the CDK
Yeah.
code, and
Yes.
could
Basically,
you?
yes.
Hmm.
Yes.
This code is
This
the
is the
function.
actual lambda.
Uh, hmm.
Yes,
Yes,
you're
go ahead.
saying.
No, no, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so this is the actual Lambda function which will run on AWS server once you hit on a function. As we are working with the CDK Cloudfront CDK, so that we can set up our infrastructure as code. So what we are trying to do is, instead of going to the Lambda interface and uploading the function directly or through some tool, what we are trying to do is we are trying to create a stack, as we have seen in our previous class as well. And by with code, we are trying to say that deploy a lambda function on AWS. So it will need to identify which lambda function. So that's why we are saying from asset, and it will be in lambda folder. So that's what we have the folder of lambda. So if you keep the name of let's say if I say it's a hello lambda, if my folder name is hello lambda, then I will need to call here hello lambda. So that's the difference. Now we need to import as we have already from AWS CDK lambda. So we have imported it. Now, as you can see, there's no error. So lambda dot function, this should be the context of CDK. We are inside the constructor hello handler, or you can name it anything else. Let's say hello bootcamp handler. What the name you want to give it? Hello bootcamp handler. And as you can see, the benefit of using the API, you can select, you can provide a dot, and it will show you the list. So whatever function you want, dot you want to, the function is based on Java or it is based on Node.js. So you can specify the runtime so that AWS knows which type of function you have deployed, you are going to deploy. We are using Node.js, so we need to specify the Node.js specific version. And lambda.code.from asset, it means we need some files to be uploaded on AWS. That's why it's always when we'll be using website in next example. So we also need to upload. So always, in case of you need to upload something as a file or as a content, then you always call it from assets. And this is the name of our file hello.ts, and inside that the name of our function is handler. So that's why we are mentioning here hello.handler. So for our the library, definitely it's exporting. So hello.handler, we are mentioning it over here. So that's how we have set up this function. And once we are done with it, what we can do is we can just uh, I'll explain Bootstrap in a while. We'll call the synth and then we can deploy. So our function will go and deploy to AWS. But before doing that, before I'll call the deploy, let me show the deploy, what will happen. If I'll try to npm run build, and then I'll call CDK deploy. Hopefully it gives error early. I believe so.
Zeeshan, by the way, you had bought a new
Yeah.
computer. Have you started using it, or this one is the old one?
Yeah, I have been using from past 2 or 3 months, I guess. Since I bought, I just after 2 weeks I started using it, so I'm using the new one.
Okay, okay. With the six core one. You have the 6 core one right now. Hmm.
Yes, yes, yes. The 6 core one. Okay, so you can see we are facing an error. The stack uses assets, so the toolkit stack must be deployed to the environment. Call the CDK bootstrap. So whenever you want to use assets, or a particular, if your YAML file is more than 50K kilobyte size of your YAML file, then what you need to do is first you need to bootstrap your uh, what you say stack. It will be only a once. So if I'll to show you, I have to delete my initial toolkit, initial stack. Otherwise it will be a stack which will be created on AWS, and then you can for next as long as you will be working on AWS, you can keep that stack and you don't have to delete it. So for that, what you need to do is you need to call CDK bootstrap, and what it is you can learn about it from here. So it just, what it will do is it will create a stack on AWS, and inside that stack it will create S3 bucket. Why it is doing is because whenever you want to deploy anything which requires to deploy a code, so in our case we are deploying Lambda function, or in case of you are deploying a static website, so you need to upload HTML, CSS, JavaScript file. So what AWS do is always create a zip file and then deploy it. So in this case, it always requires, so there should be a separate SDK where you deploy the zip file, it upload the zip file, and then once our actual stack is being created, then it use the function from that deployment. I'll show you. So at this moment, um, AWS Amazon, let me show you something in first. I'll show. Okay, why it is slow. Okay, so cloud formation, and there is nothing at this moment. It's empty. Now what I'm going to do is I'll not deploy anything. I should not be in any folder. CDK bootstrap. It's just like we are creating a basic structure, like whenever we talk about the existing examples, so we say the basic bootstrap code is here, and then you can move from there. So that's why it's create a one stack on AWS named CDK toolkit.
Some people might, Zeeshan, get confused because of the bootstrap word. There's also a library called Bootstrap. That has nothing to do with this.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned that whenever we say that you have a basic structure of a code, so you say you have a bootstrap code, so just get that code and start working above that. So that's why AWS named it bootstrap. So you create a basic stack and the S3 bucket initially, which will always be there. You once bootstrap that, so then you can work above that. So it has created first. Let's go over there. So you can see it. We have a stack named CDK toolkit, and inside that stack, you can see the resource, and it will show you what it has done. It has one staging bucket. So there is a one S3 bucket inside that. And whenever we'll deploy I'll show you in a moment. Once we deploy our function will part of this. At this moment, it's empty. So there is nothing. Now, once we done with the bootstrap, now we can call the CDK deploy. CDK deploy. Now you need to understand it will create a separate stack. The stack we have created here is a bootstrap stack. So it will always be there, and all the asset first will upload in this bucket, and then it will be used in your stack. So you can see it has started. Bootcamp Lambda 1 stack. So the stack creation has been started. Generally, this deployment does not take time, but today I feel that from the evening it's quite slow. The creation of okay. So you can see all the steps. It's creating a bootcamp handler service. It's creating a role as well inside the. Okay, so it's done, and now you can refresh it, and we can see we have a CDK metadata, hello bootcamp handler, and hello bootcamp. So that's a function and that's a role. So what we can do is, let me show you first the CDK tool S3 bucket which we have created with the bootstrap. So refresh, you will see asset. Inside this asset, you will see a zip file. That's the zip file. So that's the zip file which the CDK toolkit has uploaded to first this S3 bucket. Then it's being loaded in this function. So this let's I can click on this function, a link, and it will open the Lambda function interface.
Given the
Okay. So now you
given the latest
yes,
developments, we have to clarify that now we have two methods of deploying Lambda functions. One is using the zip file, and the other one is the
yes,
container, which will be covered later in some other step later on.
yeah, yes. Basically, because that requires the creation of a image file, and then it will deploy based on the container image. So at this moment, we are focusing on the simpler step. So as you can see, we are in at the Lambda screen, and it shows you we have one function. The code storage size 1.7 KB, the hits it has received or not, whatever it is. If I'll go to the application, it will show me Bootcamp Lambda 1 stack. So in my one deployment there is a 4 functions, so it all those functions will reside inside that stack. I can see the list of functions from here, or I can go at this function and I can see function from here. It says package type, this and this, zip, runtime, code size, minutes, everything. Now from here from this screen, you can see the code of your function. They have given us an editor inside the web interface, so I can edit my function live on the AWS server. And then definitely I need to save and refresh everything, and then it's telling me the handler and everything, all the details of that particular function. Okay, once we are done with that, what we need to do is we need to test that function. So 2 things: we need to create a bootstrap. That's the separate thing, it has nothing to do. From now onwards, I can deploy 100 functions, I can deploy 100 static websites. CDK bootstrap has nothing to do because it's been there and it will always be there. And whatever you will deploy, it will be first uploaded over here, and then it will come to this stack or whatever stack you will create. So that's the one thing. Another thing, we have created a Lambda function, and we want this Lambda function to be deployed on our AWS. For
Zeeshan,
that, we
I
are
just have a
using
question.
CDK.
I just have a question. You
Yes,
did not compile this code, the function. It compiled, the
I
CDK
did.
compiled. Did you compile the code?
Yes, I did, but CDK deploy does it as a pre-step if we do not.
Okay.
But I did. Uh, I run the npm run build.
So if you npm run build, you run the npm run build on the root directory.
Yes, we always do at the root directory. It has available at the package level, so it runs the TypeScript build and in the complete folder. So if all your files in any folder you have a TCS file, all will be the compiled and converted to the JS.
Okay. And if you don't do it, CDK will do it.
CDK do it. CDK will do it.
Mhm.
Okay, so once we have this code, now we want to deploy that code to deployment. As we have seen that we need to specify a construct, and in that construct we are mentioning that we need to deploy a function. We name it hello handler anything, and then we are mentioning that we need to upload from the Lambda folder and then hello world, and it will, once you call the CDK deploy, it will be uploaded to your server. Stack will be created and your function will be deployed as we have seen the function here. So that's our function. Now what we need to do is we need to verify if our function is working or not. So before going to the test API, we can test it directly as well, but that will not give us uh, it will give a different style. Let's configure. If you call the test, it will ask what type of test you want to do. So we want to call it API Gateway Proxy. So we want to test this application. Name it anything. Let me call it API Lambda function, and it will do all these things. Create this event. So now we have this event which will test our function. We can again hit the test button. So it will show you the execution detail. So it will show you the logs, the response, whatever the response it has, summary, all the things. So you can easily test your function live on the AWS function server. But definitely will not be doing it too often. But it's to test a particular function, you can do it on live so that you can verify if there is a problem or you want to debug it live. So that's the simple thing to test AWS function. It will give you the response like this, and you are done with it. And now what we need to do is, once we create a function, we need to call it through some URL. At this moment, there is no specific URL by which you can call this function. You can call it, I guess, there was a CLI code from which I can test using the CLI as well. Let me check that. AWS Lambda. I guess I'm missing it somewhere. Anyways, I'll find out, and either I'll paste the article or something, so you can test with the CLI in AWS CLI as well. So at this moment, what we have done is we have created the AWS function and we have deployed it, but we do not have any URL on which client-side application can hit on API. So we have created a function. Now our client-side, as we have done with the Netlify, always when we deploy our function, Netlify gives us an URL. So in this case, we need an API. So for that, we need to create an API gateway. So as you can see, new API.lambda REST API, and you provide a name, and then you provide an hello world. So API gateway. So there is another module named API gateway. It's again a service of AWS. So you have another service. Everything is distributed in a service. So every feature is available. So here you can see API gateway. So once you will need to create an API gateway on which user hit, and then this API gateway will call the your function. So at this moment there is nothing. So what we are going to do is, I'll also show you here API gateway. It gives you the option AWS Lambda API, this and that's. So what we can do is we can pick this here or from the code we have seen in the repository. But again, it's an API gateway service. So for that, we need to install API gateway.
As I mentioned in the last class, soon this installing it for every module separately in 2.0 will be resolved. It will contain, it should be contained in a single package.
Today I was feeling that it should be we should not be allowed, because for every new API you have to first go and install it.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a big con in installing it separately.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's installed, and now I need to import static as whatever you want to name it, API gateway or API GW from API gateway. So as I have named it API GW, so I'll change the name. It is API GW. What is backend? The backend is this function hello.
So basically, you are attaching a API gateway to the Lambda function.
Yeah, basically because the function itself is deployed, but you cannot call using a REST URL to that function. So, but our client-side application always need a REST API, a URL which can be hit to call a function or call a server. So therefore that AWS provides a separate API gateway, and it has a quite lot of features. Even it's only in API gateway you can customize quite many things. So at this moment we are just naming it. So my Lambda endpoint. Once we are done with it, what we can do is just deploy it. So it will give us a URL. Deploy. uh, Initially you will feel this screen is quite new to you, because AWS CDK is creating few resources behind the scene which you do not know. So it might creating a role, it might creating a policy. They show you the list. Initially we do not absorb these things, but you keep reading them so that you slowly and gradually you start to understand what it is saying. So it's creating a resources, and it creating it, you can see it's saying it's a policy change. So there it will be adding to the CloudWatch role. So it will be adding a role into the for the CloudWatch. So I'll show you the role as well. So yes, that's the benefit of CDK. Instead of using the YML directly, so it does quite a lot many things behind the scene for you, so you do not have to worry about it. Okay, it's initializing. Once it's initializing, then we'll have this URL and we can call this function. Meanwhile, meanwhile it's deploying. Let me show you one more thing from this API Gateway library module. What you can do is it's a Lambda backend. What you can do is you can make it a proxy false. So at this moment, URL you will receive will directly be called, and that can be a get call, that can be a post call, anything, because Lambda function has an open-ended. You can specify your, so you customize your API, and you can say only the function can receive only a get call, function can receive only a post call, or get and post but not a put. So you need to specify proxy false, and then you can specify the methods to specifically call your function. Now you can see it has given me a URL. I can copy this URL.
How did we get this URL, Zeeshan? By giving a command?
Just no, I just deployed it. The CDK has given it directly. I haven't done anything. There is nothing inside the code. So the CDK CLI provides it directly, because CDK, I believe it's understands what we are trying to do. We are trying to deploy a function, so it returns the URL. Paste this URL in the browser, and you can see hello CDK, you have hit slash. So that's what our function was. Hello CDK, you have hit slash. So now I can, as you can see, I can call hello slash XYZ. You can control these by using the other functionality of API gateway. So that's the simple, and we can call it post as a post URL as well. So let me go to the what you say, Postman, and you can hit the URL.
Postman is a service.
Yes. You can hit the get URL, you can hit the post URL. So at this moment it is accepting get and post both, because Lambda function accept all type of request. You need to specify specifically which type of request you want to handle. Either you want to handle everything or not. So you can set me this, and then we'll move to the. So what I can do is I can call it this, and I can so you assign it a variable, and then in the variable I can say, let's say, cars, and I'm saying only accept a get request, no post request. So now on, from now onwards, this API can handle only get request. Okay, so it's done. Meanwhile, it's deploying. Let me show you the API gateway AWS has created for us. I have shown you this interface previously. Now you can see my Lambda endpoint. Go to this, it will show you complete resource, what you can call, how you can, so you can pass anything / proxy. It will give you the detail stages, and there are many things. We might sometime need to explore API gateway in detail, but you can see all these details from here. So every API endpoint you create has all these details, and you can access them and review them. So it will give you, let's say, let me go to dashboard. So it will show you API call latency. So you can see the API which is being hit by the user, what's happening over there, and the detail about the function is separately in Lambda function interface. It has one error. Okay, proxy false. So when you try to add resources, then you need to call proxy false. That means you are saying that default URL should not work. It should work for the cars only. Okay. So what it will happen is you'll be seeing the change over here.
Zeeshan, can you repeat this? What did this add resource do?
Okay. So what is happening is at this moment, the Lambda function, the interface of CDK given us a URL name like this. We have this URL. Now what we can, at this moment, this function can accept any kind of URL after that. And all the hit will go to this function. And it can accept get, it can accept post, it can accept anything. So what I'm saying to this API that add a resource cars, so it will only be prod / cars, nothing else. And I'm saying that cars resource should only accept get request and nothing else. So it will accept only get request. On the post request, it will give us an error. So we are specifying our get methods, we are specifying our resources, so URLs. So we do not have to specify inside our function code, but we'll make this on API gateway. Otherwise, what you need to do is you need to specify here that if it's a get request, then it should entertain, otherwise should not entertain this function. So once it is deployed, URL will remains the same. So let me call prod. It says internal server error. Why? Because there is no slash. There is cars. So you have hit the cars. If I'll say internal server, so it's specified to a particular resource / because this is your main URL provided by the AWS. you will definitely be mapping with your domain. After that, so this is your slash. This is your slash, and after that you are specifying that it should be a cars. So it will only accept cars URL and nothing else. And if I'll go to this postman and try to hit the post request, it will also say internal server error, because there is no we have specified strictly that it should only be get request. So we can go on API gateway and we can see the details from here as well. So actually we are looking at two things: Lambda, how do we deploying the Lambda, and the API gateway, how it will be. Now you can see previously it was showing slash curly bracket anything. Now it's saying slash cars and slash get. So it only accept get request. So that's how, and you can add more methods over there. I guess resources, create a method. So you can do it from interface as well, but definitely we are working with as infrastructure as a code. So if we want to do something, we should follow from here.
Zeeshan,
So if I want to add post method, I can.
if we wanted to create two gateway points on a single Lambda function, is that possible?
Basically, this is the API gateway, so I can create a two reference over here. Name it a two thing. My lambda point 2. So it will be another item for me if in this case. We can do this easily. Items 2, API 2, items 2. And let's say you want to name it a car. We might need to name it.
Change it to something else.
To planes. So I'll planes or trucks. So we can do these things. Okay, so that's the one thing. Another thing I'll just show you related to the API gateway, which is quite interesting for us, Sarsia, that we create API access key, API keys. So with that, we can create API access key with usage plan, how many requests it should handle, and what is the rate limit and everything. So we can specify. So we can specify a function with the API gateway, and we can tell that this API should be called for that particular access key and for 10 times a month only, just like AWS is doing for us. So we can do it over the AWS interface. We can do it for our APIs as well. That's
and
completely clear. So you need
on a single in a single gateway, can you define two resources?
Yes, we can define two resources. Single API gateway.
Yes.
Okay, you are saying that. I haven't tried that, because it means that you are saying same function can be handled by two URLs. It's item underscore 2, and I'll say it hello world. That's what you are saying. Okay, so I need to do it for this as well, because we need to specify method, otherwise it will not work. Underscore 2. So I believe it should be working. So I need to test it.
There's no better way of finding out.
Yes. Yes. One thing also we need to explain that at this moment we always need to deploy that function to the AWS, then we can test it. So we can run this AWS function locally as well meanwhile it's deploying. So let me explain. So what you need to do is you need to install the serverless application model CLI, which we have discussed in our previous class, that I haven't shown you. So you need to install the serverless application model. For that, you also need to install Docker. So once you are working with this, you need first install Docker, then install the serverless application model CLI, and there is a single command which will start your Lambda function at the localhost.
So therefore, it means you can test it locally also.
Yes, yes. It will take a single command. So once it's done, I'll show you that command as well. So you can see. But for the Docker, what you need to see is your if you are working with Windows, so your Windows should be professional Windows. For the home, you will face a lot of problem with the Docker. Now you can see we have two URLs. Why these two URLs? Because I have created two API endpoints. So that's why we have two. You can see Lambda endpoint 2 and normal Lambda. I'm missing token authorization. Why? Oh, sorry. We need to call cars. Or maybe trucks, because I didn't see which function it is. Yes. So you need to see identify with the name my lambda endpoint 2 and my lambda endpoint. So for that, you can see my lambda endpoint is this one, and it has attached resource car and hello world, and my lambda endpoint 2 has a resource attached truck. So I copied the URL from my lambda endpoint 2, which has a resource connected as a truck. So that's why it was giving me error. So you can see there is a truck and car is not working. Why? Because it's in a separate API endpoint. So I'll have to copy this API endpoint, and I'll again slash will not work. I'll have to call cars, showing cars. I'll have to call hello world. It will show hello world. So it's working. But
it works.
you will name it anything, so it will not work. So you can specify resources on API gateway. So whatever, so that's very important whenever you are working with the Lambda function, because in Netlify, when we explored Lambda function, we haven't tested, or it was not available, because that you can specify a particular resource or you can specify a particular function. So all the calls were reaching to your function in Netlify, and then on inside the function you have to specify that if it's in a post method, then do something or not. With AWS, what the benefit of AWS is, you can deploy your function and then you can create API gateway in front of your function. In that API gateway, you can specify that only particular URL should be hit that function, only particular function should hit that function. So you do not have to change the code inside the function. All these things will be handled before the function. So it will save your execution of the function. You should be noted that because function call require few milliseconds and it will cost you if you are working with the larger application. So you need to understand that as well. So that's what we have created, the resources with the API Lambda API gateway. The last thing what I need to show you related to this is you can run Lambda function locally. To run Lambda function locally, there are few examples given, but most importantly, you need to install uh, okay, serverless application model SAM. You need to install it first, and then you just need to, as already mentioned, you need to create a template, export a template. So again, first install Docker, install SAM. That's done. You have all these details over here. So instead of going into it, what you need to do is you need to call CDK synth no staging greater sign template. What it will do is, as we have learned, that whenever we deploy a CDK, it creates a YAML file, a cloud formation file, and then it creates the infrastructure on AWS. When you call CDK no staging template YAML, it create that YAML file for us on our local machine, and then you can call your function by name, or you can create a local startup API. So you can do it both. So once you install it, just call CDK synth YAML. Let me show you first code. There is no YAML file inside our folder. So there is no YAML file. What I'll do is I'll call CDK synth dash dash no staging greater sign template.yaml. So what it will do is it will create YAML file for our infrastructure which we are working on. So enter it. It has generated a YAML file, and we have this file over here, and it will show you everything you have. But what at this moment we are
It
interested
will
in are
it will show you if you are not using CDK, you would have to enter all these lines.
yeah, basically. So if I go to the end of the file, oh, it has actually created around 533 lines of code, which we have done in just 20 or 25 lines.
Mhm.
Mostly are okay. So that's the template you have created. And then what you are interested is the name of your function. If you want to call your function as a CLI, so hello bootcamp handler, this is the name of your function. Copy it, and then what you need to do is see this. You need to call same local invoke function name dash dash no event. So same local invoke the name of a function dash dash no dash event. Now it will again for the very first time. What it is doing is, that's why it requires the Docker, because it creates a container, and then it's run that container in at the local machine as a function. With this line, it will show you function response in the terminal. If you want to test it as an API, as a localhost API, so do not have to worry about, just call same local start API. So it will give you a localhost slash 3000 or name it, and you can call it with that. So for the very first time, building an image takes time, and you might see Docker. Once installed, you will see this type of Docker screen, and it have images. So as you can see, these are my previous images. So there will be another one once it is done. Other than that, I guess we have covered most of it. So Focus is how you are going to work with the Lambda function. The function, the normal server code we have done quite many time with the Netlify. So there is no difference into that. How you will be creating it and how you will be viewing in your AWS interface. That's the important part. Then how you will create an interface of API gateway. Like, let me refresh it so we can see. It will show us multiple API endpoints. So you can see cars, hello world, and as we have created two API endpoints, so it will show you API endpoint 1, API endpoint 2. Inside API endpoint 2, you will have trucks. So that's how you can see the API gateway and you can control everything over from there. And it will show you how many calls you have received on this particular URL as well.
It seems your sixth core is not doing any
Okay.
help, giving us any help.
it, I, it takes same time previously. Even I was not on live stream, so I guess it's might require a supercomputer to do it in a seconds. Let's buy Apple M1.
Yes, yes, maybe that will help. I'm planning on having a Apple M1X with the 12 cores that is being rumored
Mhm.
and with the Starlink internet connection.
Okay. So I'll need to recce you to
Mhm.
follow you someplace.
Then we are then we are going to the mountains and we are going to code from there.
Yeah, that will be great.
What are we going to do
Hmm.
next?
So
Zeeshan, maybe we can start discussing that.
it's done. It's done from this API Lambda. If we can want to move on a second example, so I can
Uh-huh.
show that. Otherwise,
Mhm.
from the Lambda function, we are done.
Okay, let's move to the next one, and
Okay.
when we come back to see the results.
Okay. Sure. Okay. So for this particular example, what we have seen, how we can deploy a Lambda function, that means a server, API, which client can call. So that means we also need a client and we also need to deploy that client. So definitely for deployment of a client, we need a client side code that will be done with pure HTML, which it's not done in today's age. So either it will be a React or it will be a Gatsby or any code. So we need to deploy our client side code to AWS server. So for that, what AWS asks is it requires three modules from AWS: AWS CloudFront, AWS S3, because your website or any static code, as I have explained previously, anything you need to upload files or content, that will resides in S3. And uh, S3 can be you will create a bucket on S3 and your website will reside inside that bucket, and you will make S3 bucket as a website, and then you can hit the API on the URL which AWS will give you. and then you can call your website from that URL. So it's basically deploying a static website. To deploy a static website, you need to follow particular style. Uh, you need to call few APIs. So I'll show you. It's done, and as you can see, with this, this is the information, and that's the response. You have hit undefined because there is no URL. Instead of that, what you can do is you can call local and name it start dash API. So it has given you the localhost 3000. You can go to the browser, local host 3000. Now you can see there's a slash, so I need to call it cars. Respond with cars. I'll call it hello world. So now you can test your application. Spell mistakes, so don't worry about it. You can call your application from Lambda function from client side, and you can test it everything at the client side, and then you can easily deploy at the end. So that's what related to the Lambda function. Stop the URL and you are good to go. Okay, moving back to the example of deployment. Okay, so now what we need to understand is we need a few resources. One is AWS CloudFront, AWS S3, and AWS deployment. Again, we need to create a folder, set up an application, install these libraries. These are important. As you can see, we need CDK S3, CDK S3 deployment, AWS CloudFront, AWS CloudFront origin. We need these five libraries to install in our code, and then we need to work on it.
So, Zeeshan, what is a CloudFront? We know S3. What is a S3 bucket? It is basically a directory where you can save files. What is CloudFront?
Yes. Basically, CrowdFront is what you say your SDN. It's kind of an SDN so that it will provide you the URL, because with S3 you will not have a web
Sorry, if I
URL.
can get you to mispronounce, it's a CDN,
Sorry, CDN. Yes, it's a CDN.
a content delivery network with a lot of nodes. Yes.
Yeah. Basically, CDN, it gives us like we have talked about the Netlify. So the pros of Netlify was that when you deploy your website on the Netlify, so it's on CDN, so your website can be a static web as a static can be accessed from anywhere. So exactly for that service, we in AWS we have a CloudFront. When you deploy your application on S3, it will be a bucket, and inside bucket there will be few files. You cannot call, let's say, hello.com or xyz.com to access your website. So if I'm developing a, let's say, student management system, I'll deploy it on S3, but to access from a particular URL, I need to provide a CloudFront. So CloudFront will give us a CDN for our static website, and then we will hit the URL. It will actually responding from the S3 files, and it will working as a S3. So what AWS did is S3 initially was for static assets. So you can place images, files, anything for static images. But then they transform it into as a website as well. So if you want to deploy your website as well, so you will deploy your code in a particular bucket in S3, and it will work as a deployment because it's in a static website. And then you can with CloudFront you can hit it. So that's how it works. So for that, let me So there's nothing CDK init app. App script, and we need to install these for packages. So I'm installing them all together. To understand it clearly, you must need to explore these modules. So it's just an S3 bucket. The important part is S3 deployment, because S3 bucket is a normal bucket. If you want to deploy your website as on S3, so you need to use the S3 module, which is S3 deployment, and it is not a L1 construct, because there is nothing something S3 deployment in Cloudfront. So the service is S3. There is a CDK construct. You can see the name CDK construct. So it's not an what you say CFN. It's not in the CFN construct. CFN construct is exactly available to AWS resource.
That is L1. This is L2.
So now you can see what we need to. Yeah, this is the S3 deployment is L2 and S3 is L1. So now you can see what we need to do is we need to call website bucket S3 bucket, give it a name, give it an index file, and give it a public read access. That will create a bucket. You need to deploy a website, your folder, which has all the content of your website. So what you can do is you can call s3 deploy dot bucket deployment. This, name it anything. You need to provide sources. It's a required property. So for the sources, s3 deploy dot source dot asset. Again, it was same with the Lambda. So we did with the Lambda. Here we were doing with the website. So we need to provide a folder name in which our code resides, and then we need to provide a destination bucket. So that's the destination bucket. In this bucket, we need to deploy the code, and there's one thing missing, which is distribution. I'll show you that in a while. So we are done with the code. So once you did this, it will deploy the website as a bucket, but it will not have any CDN access. So for that, you need to go, either you can explore from here. It's available here. You just call this Cloudfront origin and provide my bucket either this way, or it also available here. Yes, they have provided us three uh, styles to call the Cloudfront distribution. This is a new one. It's an experimental phase, but definitely it will be finalized, and there are others, so we do not have to worry about them. We are done with it. Code. So we have basic structure. So first of all, we need a website. So let me create a folder, website, or you can name it anything. It's not just a website. My web, add a file. So index.html, index.js. At this moment, we are not creating React or Gatsby app, so I am just creating a basic application for us. That's our initial display, and for JS file, just I'm saying console log. That's uh, that's it. We have our website inside this folder. If you are working with React, so definitely you need to call the build. If you are working with Gatsby, you need to call build, and that build folder should be deployed. So in our case, this is our website. But in case of React or Gatsby or any library or framework which deployed after the build process, so we need to run the build and we need to provide the path of that build folder. In this case, this is our site in the lib. What we need to do is we need to create something here. What we need to create is we need to call these two first. So there is no s3 import select as s3 from s3 deploy from s3 deployment. And as we will require in a moment, Cloudfront as okay, we are done with it. So S3 bucket, website bucket, or my web bucket, whatever you want to name it. Then we need to specify, as I told, that AWS made it S3 as a uh, static website holder as well. So you need to specify when you are creating S3 bucket, you can mention that it has a website index document which will be index.html. That's why we need to specify file name as index.html. If I'll name it hello.html, then I have to specify here hello.html. So that's you, and I want to make it a read access. Then S3 deploy bucket, deploy website, whatever you want to name it. Resources S3 deploy, so it's from deployment dot source dot asset, and we need to name it as
Right.
our folder. So
Zishan,
my
if I
folder name is
my understanding is correct, the bucket deployment basically copies the file from S3. It copies the file to S3 as well as copies from
yes.
S3 to that CloudFront.
No, it does not deploy at this moment. It will not deploy the CloudFront. CloudFront will once we specify the CloudFront, then it will give access to CloudFront on this.
Okay, okay, okay.
Okay, so my web, either you provide this or not at this moment, it's not important because it's an optional. Okay, so once we are done this,
Hmm.
it will deploy your S3, but it will not give you a particular URL on which you can go and access your website. It will create a bucket and it will everything available inside web folder will be into S3. So for that, we need to use CloudFront. That's also available here. So you need to call a distribution. Distribution CloudFront. So name it CloudFront distribution. Again, this name default behavior. You need to provide the origin. So where it is. So for this, we need to specify our website bucket. And yes, the origin is S3. So for origin, it also has import static as origin from CloudFront origin. So what origin is actually, you can specify where actually the content is. It's either it's a HTTP origin, either it's a load balancer. So if you have a website and you have a infrastructure and you have created a load balancer, so you have to you want to specify the CloudFront over the load balancer, or is it an S3 origin? So if you want to provide on S3, that's how you provide this S3 and you provide this bucket. And in the deployment bucket, you need to specify the distribution. Okay. So once you deploy this, you will have this, what do you say, website, and you want to have output const
You're printing the URL for the CDN.
yes, for the domain. The type of CNF output. I'm missing the CNF output dot. Let me check CNF output. Oh. CNF output should be working like this.
I think you are not using the prefix. You should say CDK dot.
CDK dot. Basically, it's imported it directly. CFN or CNF.
You don't need to import it. It's included in the core.
Yes, CNF output. So I guess I'm making some mistake related to the way I call it. Okay.
You just say, open a bracket, and then you say this, and the name and the properties.
That's what it is. I guess there is a parameter missing or something. CDK.cnf output. Either it's
just say the only parameter is required is value, and just say distribution dot domain name.
That's what I'm distribution dot domain name. It's actually giving me error on that the value of type of CNF output is not callable. Did you mean the new? Oh. So you need to call the construct. So all the construct are the objects. So you need to call the new. But again, you need to read the error. So once you face the error, you must focus on the reading the error. So Rafan Qureshi taught us in the initial days of coding that you need to clearly read the errors. Okay, so once you are done with that, so what we did is we have created S3 bucket. We have created the CloudFront distribution, and we have then created the S3 bucket deployment, which is L2 construct created by CDK. And we need to specify our website, the bucket web, the name of our bucket, and the distribution. Once we are done with it, let's call it npm run build CDK deploy. So meanwhile it's being deployed, it's initializing. I'll show you the what's currently we have in S3. These are two errors, so forget about it. Currently we have only one bucket, which is the one we have created with Bootstrap. So it has one function. So it will also receive a zip file for the website, and there will be another bucket for our website as well. There will be a formation for our website, and yes, and there will be one more service named Cloudfront. Cloudfront. So at this moment there is nothing. You will see the detail of the CDN here.
So therefore, basically, today we covered first we Lambda, which is was step one, and then
Yes,
cloud formation, deploying of a static website, which is step two. So we
yes,
basically covered two steps today.
yes. Step
Yeah.
01 and step 02.
Step zero was hello CDK. This is step one and two.
Ze- it's 02. Yes, 1 and
Mhm.
2.
So therefore, we are now anybody is now able to create websites, have Lambda functions connected to it. This is
Yes.
that is the basic website. You can start working with it.
Yes, yes. Now, and as much as we have learned in our previous classes related to the Gatsby and everything, so you can
Mhm.
deploy your Gatsby static website on this. You just need to mention the static folder, build folder of your Gatsby.
Mhm.
Just a deployment, and I'll show you the URL and we are done. Meanwhile, it's deploying. As you can see, there it is creating quite few roles. So in your IMA user, you will see there will be many roles being created because as CDK creates role for a specific service individually. So you can see there are 6 roles, few were previously created. So as you can see, Lambda 1 stack hello bootcamp, Lambda 1 stack endpoint 2. So for each service, CDK creates a role for a particular user so that service can be accessed with that role and nothing else. So it creates the security as well. Oh, okay, let me see if there is. So we have a stack which is in progress. We have a S3 bucket is created. You can see this is the new bucket for our website. It has a public access. Let's go over there. It's still in progress, so it's deploying something over it. Let's see our bootstrap bucket. So that bootstrap bucket has assets, and it should have, as you can see, there is other zip file. Why it is here? Because as I have told you, if you want to deploy anything which will be a content, so it will first come to this bucket and then it will go your actual bucket.
So in that bucket, there is a zip file of the website.
Yes, there is a website. If it's a function, then it will be a zip file of your function. If it's a website, then it's a zip file of your website. The complete content will be inside that folder.
Mhm.
Mm. It's on a step 7, so there are two more steps, 7 over 9. So it's creating the CloudFront distribution. So we are at the point of CloudFront distribution creation, the last step, I guess. Okay, so meanwhile, let me show the CloudFront. These modules are mentioned over here. So you can use these modules, and basic code also available in this lab function. And you can even individually explore how CloudFront work. You can create your distribution using this. If you want to do it with load balancer, then that's the simple S3 bucket. So you can customize your S3 bucket as that's the L2 construct I'm mentioning again because it's does not map directly to any AWS service. So you can create S3 deployment. So it handles the all to make your S3 bucket as a website. So there is a property called S3 is website. So the it all the things managed by this S3 deployment service. Oh, it's still
Internet is so slow today.
yeah. That's what I said. From today evening, I was facing this that they are taking too much time on. Uh,
Actually basically telling you your computer is good, your 6 cores are working. It is the network connection which is the problem.
Basically, everything is running on AWS, so there is no problem with laptop. So I'm safe side at this moment.
Mhm.
I don't know why it's just taking time on the CloudFront creation. Currently in progress.
At this point, I want to point out
Yes.
that basically we have now replicated all the functionality we learned on Netlify. We can now do it
Yes.
on AWS. But now the game begins. We
Yeah.
will, after today, we will start working on GraphQL with AppSync APIs and constructs and so on. As we mentioned previously, there are more than 170
Yes.
services and increasing every day. What they have
As you
done
can
is,
see,
Mhm.
we in a few moments we have used 4 or 5 services. The IAM user was in place, the CloudFront, the S3, the API gateway, the Lambda function. 5 services we have used just a moment ago. Okay, it's deployed and we have this URL now, the CloudFront URL. So you can copy this URL and go to your browser and hit the URL. So it will be no such key. index.html. Not sure what the problem is, but you will see URL in this format, and you will see, because it might take time again to deploy and to verify. But you will see this interface of Cloudfront. That's the web it's mentioning over here. You can see from here, it will give you the domain name. So that's the URL, and the complete detail over here. The website will be here. You can see web study. Okay, so the problem is this. So this key caused the problem to deploy the static website in particular folder. So you do not have to. Once you are done with this, you will have the, as you can see, HTML and JS files are over there, and they are available over this URL. Just the property I have already previously added, it has some problem. Otherwise, it's done.
So you just have to redeploy it.
Yeah, just have to redo. I have already pushed it, deployed it, but on and all, you are done with it. Just create these structure, and you will have all your data over S3 will be here in your S3 bucket. It will create this bucket, and inside that you will have your folder. And on the CloudFront, it will show you the detail. If you want to add telemetry, then it will provide you the monitoring of your website, the stats. You can see cache and everything, all the details. So CloudFront itself gives you lot of details related to your web particular static website which you have deployed. You can see all the detail from here.
Zeeshan, thank you so very much for such a wonderful class. Basically, we covered two of the most important services, AWS services for web developers, and we basically replicated all the functionality of Netlify, of basically a CDN as well as Lambda functions, and we deployed them. We also tested them locally. From next class, we will start AppSync, which will start developing. Today we did the REST APIs. From
Yes.
next class, we will start working with the GraphQL APIs, which is very important, and that service is AppSync. Thank you, everybody.
Yes.
See you in the next class. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye, everyone.